And I would welcome everybody this evening. And of course, since we've been doing some of these classes together, this is all about self reliance. And the concept is that making provisions will help us for the future. But if you don't make any provisions or people around you that you may be talking to, then you end up being a victim. And since we have that choice, then we have to choose which one we want to be. Do we want to be prepared or be a victim? And when we talk about preparation, it has to be based on principles, understanding of principles, not just lists of things to buy and skills to have. Now, by the way, you need to have stuff and you need to have skills, but really you want to understand the principles of how and why things work, because what you know, what you have in your head and your heart, but what you have in your head and heart is more important than what you own in the storehouse. So, principles are what we'll be talking about, and I try to explain these things as we go along. And just principles are just unchanging laws and truths, how and why things actually work, and how they will always work. That's why it's important to understand the principles involved. As I go through this, some of these principles that we talk about that are kind of the overview principles, there's some of those will be presented as we go along, but I talk about them all the time, so I won't spend much time there. The most fundamental one being the law of provident living, which is spiritual attitude, knowledge, and then stuff. And it's about having an understanding of how and why things work that helps you have an attitude that says, okay, I know what to do. I know how to fix things. I know how to take care of it. But also having knowledge will help you have the right stuff so that you'll know that, yeah, really, I can take care of myself. These 9 areas that I talk about, everything you need to know, do, and have is in these 9 areas. And tonight we're really talking about tools and supplies. Fuel is about supplies, but those supplies give us a tool which we use for light, for heat, for flame, and those kinds of things. So this is a supplies class that we'll be doing, and it's about fuels for grid down living. And I always mention grid down because we have a communication grid, we have a power grid, we have a transportation grid. We're all linked together with these things. And if we weren't able to just go and easily replenish everything, then it's going to be what can you find, what do you have on hand. So we ask the question, since we're talking about fuels, what are fuels? They're substances that burn to produce work, and meaning heat, light, and motion. That's what we use them for. They come from a number of different types and forms. Each has its own advantage and disadvantage, and that's what I try to teach people. I want you to understand what the advantages and disadvantages are, what some of the the safety issues are with them. And I believe that it's important to have a variety of different fuels, not just one that does everything, because, well, there isn't one that'll take care of everything. So when you talk about the fuels, we can break them down into, well, there's natural things like cellulose and coal and beeswax and oil pools and tar pits. Those are just the natural things laying around. And then we have the man-made things. This is where we take a product or something that exists, and then we process it into something that would be either more convenient or would work better. We have the oil and the coal oils and the producer gas and ethanol and kerosene and propane and butane and all those kinds of things. And that's what we'll, in most cases, will use until they're all used up. And then you go back to, well, what can I find? Cellulose, we're talking about wood in that case, and coal and beeswax and whatever may be laying around in the way of oil pools. Now, fuels come in 3 different forms. You have gaseous, liquids, and then we have solid fuels. But what you have to understand is that only gases burn. You do not burn the solid, you do not burn a liquid, you actually burn a gas. And so when you have a fuel that's not in a gaseous form, it has to be heated enough so that it makes a gas so the gas could then burn. And that's one of the things that makes gasoline so dangerous and explosive, because it produces a lot of fumes, and the same thing with propane, so that it'll very easily burn. But you can have wood or wax or things like that in solid forms. You have to put some heat to it to get it to burn. So that starts to help you understand what some of the safety issues are just beginning there. So when the use of the fuels and this self-reliant living, we use it well for doing things with fuel and for light and for sanitation, for heating, transportation, just running of all kinds of tools. And we have some high heat processes like welding and cutting and sanitizing and things like that. In terms of foods, then we use food for safety to kill bacteria and parasites that may be in the food. It also gives us more variety in the food because it makes some things edible that wouldn't normally be edible. Also for taste, because some foods taste better. They're also safer if they are cooked, not just from bacteriological things, but there may be some chemicals in the food that needs to be denatured by heating it. And then, of course, we use food in the food area. We preserve foods by heating them and then bottling and canning them or drying and smoked and things like that. In the area of lighting, lighting is an important thing to have when it's dark so you can see what the heck you're doing for safety and for emotional reasons, just so that you can get things done. And then in the sanitizing area, we're using fuels for heating of water, personal hygiene, and the surroundings around us to keep things clean, and then to sanitize objects, things like that. Fuels for heating of an area for dwellings and portable shelters and for work and production space, because when it's really, really cold, having to wear heavy, bulky clothing slows you down. And some of the processes that we need to do, it's great to have a heated area, particularly if somebody happens to be sick or ill and you're trying to help them get well, then you want to have a heated area where those people can be more comfortable. And then, of course, we use fuels in transportation for vehicles and equipment operation for tractors and backhoes, ATVs, cars, trucks, and things like that. So, fuels have many great uses. And then also fuels for operating some of the tools, our tillers and chainsaws and generators and engine driven power tools. And then there are, of course, the high heat processes for cutting and welding, for forges and smelting. So fuels are very, very important in our society. And when we have a grid down world, fuels are going to be very precious. You'll want to have them on hand. So that's why we'll talk about these different ones. And you want to learn the options and have options so that you'll know what you feel like you need to have stored and also where you can find things. So when you look at the variety of fuels, here's a whole bunch of them: liquid and gaseous and solid fuels. There are different ones. So we'll be talking about that.